Hi, everyone. It's Ken Rakowski, and this is the First Mover Show with Nathaniel Getzels. Nathaniel dives into what's going on with the commercial real estate, with residential, and everything here and there from selling to buying. And Nathaniel Getzels, our host. Nathaniel, take it away.
All right. This is the First Mover, and there's a lot of things going on right now in the industry. Specifically right now, something new that happened is the tenant laws are changing, as many of you know. And so a lot of new rules came in for California today, but I want to pay special attention to them because most of these things they're looking at to do on a national level as well. So they were talking about that today. There was some discussion that it's a bipartisan issue because nobody wants to be thousands of people to be evicted. So they think they're thinking about doing it on a national scale. So I just wanted to quickly go over what the changes that just happened today are. So in essence, the stay has been put into effect until January 31st, but it breaks it up, right? So if you're a tenant, and we're talking about between March 1st and August 31st, and you've gotten a pay or quit, you have to send a declaration showing that you have financial distress that you sign, which means it's legally binding, within 15 days of receiving a notice to pay or quit.
What's the validation that you've gone through financial distress, Nathaniel, to validate that?
That is a great question. It just says that you have to be able to show you really had financial distress. So if you can show a loss of income, if you can show a decrease in your current business, things like that. It's not exactly specifically defined, but I think if you can show any distress caused by COVID, a loss of a deal, closing of a business, increased staff expenses, they're all things that'll qualify. Basically what it does is it's saying if you are on a salary job that your salary hasn't been affected, you can't just not pay rent. So you have to have a real reason to not pay rent, right? They're not just, you can't just continue to not pay with no validation. And you have to send that to your landlord within 15 days of when they send you something. So now this is where it gets a little interesting. If your household income is more than 130% of the median household income in your county and more than $100,000, your landlord can demand proof of your COVID-19 related hardship to be provided to support your declaration. And you can use tax returns, pay stubs, statements from your employer. If you're self-employed, you can make a declaration as well. If you're unable to do that, then the courts, you could have good reason you have to show you have good reason for not providing it. And that would mean inadvertent, surprise, and excusable neglect are not necessarily good reasons.
But this does go back to that whole premise that the court system, no matter what, is still not even turned on. I mean, to get that to go through then,
yeah, I mean,
the landlord says, you know what, you can't prove it, I'm gonna now evict you. That process alone can take months to happen, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at least I'm looking at, I was talking to some people, they think it could be up to a year. So that's why if you are on the landlord side of this, you should really be thinking about making a deal or doing something that puts some money or satisfies what you want to get done sooner and not necessarily depending on the courts like we have historically, because it could be a very, very, very long time, and then it might not even end up going your way. So now it's interesting. So from September 1st, meaning yesterday, through January 31st, there's other rules. So there you have to pay 25% of your rent for the time period between September 1st and January 31st. However, that's not due until January 31st necessarily. So you could pay it for 25% anywhere between that time and avoid eviction. Now, obviously, tenants can now still be evicted for other reasons, such as health and safety violations, other normal things that could cause an eviction. Having a giant party in Airbnb, for example. We've seen that. So, and so that's basically the gist of it. I can post a link if you have more questions about that.
What happens if we're property owners and we start to receive this, and that revenue is what we use to pay for the mortgage of the location? What do we do now when it comes to the banks or whomever that loan is taken out from?
Well, I would call the bank and work out either a deal of deferment or even a forbearance. That's what they're doing. But right now, I wouldn't actually agree to anything. I would just say, let's just wait, because also a foreclosure process is going to take a pretty long time if you have a regular bank loan. Private lenders are able to do different things. And actually on this point, I was wondering if Valentina, who is a great agent in Vegas, if she has any input on what the tenant rules are there or how that's really working out. Do you deal with renters at all, Valentina, or are you strictly sales?
I'm strictly sales, but they did pass something here in Las Vegas, very similar to California. Nevada is pretty much on the same page as California. Here, though, landlords are still able to evict the tenants. What they're doing here in the state, what they're doing here locally, is landlords are no longer extending their leases. So a lot of the landlords that have leases expired, they're handing their tenants a 30-day eviction notice because they're no longer under a lease due to remodeling. And that's how they're getting their tenants out of the properties.
So it sounds like Vegas is a little bit more owner friendly.
We are.
Yeah. And, you know, just so you guys know, for the owners who are in Florida, it's very owner friendly. And I believe they're able to evict much easier than mostly any other state, which is why there's some federal guidelines that are going to be coming into play here. Yeah, so thank you so much. We'll get back to you in a little bit, Valentina. I'm really excited to hear what you're going to share with us. Right now, I wanted to touch on, I know a lot of us have different businesses and ideas for businesses, but there was something interesting I was reading, and if people are looking for business ideas, there's a big space that for years has been a pain point in real estate and for realtors. And it's a majority of them feel unsafe at work, either being in vacant homes, open houses. I mean, I think something like 40% have taken self-defense classes, and 49% carry a weapon because they feel like they're so threatened or like they're in danger when they're out and about. So just putting it out there, if anyone has a business idea to work around that, I thought that was a very interesting stat. It was staggeringly higher than I thought it would be. So I wanted to share that little piece of information. And I know we've talked a lot on this show about residential real estate, and that's very good, but we also cover a lot about commercial. So I wanted to bring John.
Well, real quick.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of questions. Let's go after.
Oh,
Edwin
yeah.
wanted to
Sorry, I
understand
didn't
when you
have the
said
chat open.
forbearance.
Sorry.
Edwin wants to know forbearance. Why don't you explain that?
No,
Okay.
no, I was just tapping in regards to what the landlords can do in terms of, you know, having to not pay their mortgages when their tenants don't. They just take forbearance.
Well, forbearance it's important to know that forbearance versus deferment, right? I would suggest if you're going to make a deal with your mortgage company, I tend to lean towards the deferment side, because forbearance, unless you know you're going to have all that money coming back, you're going to have a big balloon payment in 4 months and then they could foreclose on you, right? A deferment, it tends to spread out the pain over the 30 years, or it tacks it onto the end. There's some different options that the banks can do. So,
and it doesn't mess up your credit either. The other one, the forbearance, I think messes up your credit, and the deferment just tacks it on the end. Is that correct?
that depends. I think right now, under the current rules, neither one will affect your credit short term. However, if you suddenly owe 4 months and get foreclosed on, that will destroy your credit.
Right. And then let's go to Jeffrey Glover. Jeffrey, ask your question.
Yes. Hey, what blows my mind is if all this rent is being deferred to January 31st and renters can pay and they may or may not have their job back at that time, whatever, what happens on February 1st? How can people pay back 6 months or more rent? I mean, to me, it is incredible.
And that's the thing. As of February 1st, you can be, they can file an unlawful detainer. They can, you can get a notice of eviction, basically. That all the normal stuff kicks back in. So, it gives you the idea is that it's giving renters some time to figure it out, how to pay back their landlords, and it's giving landlords some time to figure out with their banks and figure out what they're going to do to mitigate their loss.
Yeah, but I mean, Jeffrey's right. How do you actually go back? And if let's just say it's $5,000 a month, you're now at $25,000. That February 1st, when it comes around, you want to talk about not having a normal paying job in the first place. Now you have 25. It's like a student loan you have coming due now.
Oh yeah, it's massive, and a lot of people aren't going to be able to come up with that money. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Now, what I suggest for renters who know they're not going to be able to come up with that money is move before that day. Because a big part of that, and if for the lawyers in the group, feel free to chime in, but the main drivers, right, for paying your rent on time are staying where you live and not messing up your credit, right? So, and the reason to not mess up your credit is you want to be able to get into the next place. If you're going to rent or buy, you still need good credit. So now if I've moved, let's say I owe my ex-landlord $25,000. Well, now the courts are delayed for at least a year, let's say 6 months to a year. And there's no real motivator or negative consequence for me to pay that, right? To not pay that, I mean, for at least a year, and then maybe we'll go to court. But I think a lot of landlords aren't going to take the time because a year later, $20,000 will be $30,000, but that's a lot of time and energy to run after money that's, owed from so far back. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works, but I think a lot of renters are just going to try to disappear and not pay.
They're just going to go away.
Well, look, if you move out of state, you start to move around, you're harder to find. The motivator for people to pay rent is to stay where they live and not mess up their credit. Once I've moved, I don't care what my credit is because I already moved to the new place, and paying my credit and my bills there are improving my credit. And I already don't live there, so I don't care about paying it. Mm-hmm. So the two main motivators for paying your rent for those renters will be gone. Right? So Jeffrey, I don't know how they're going to come up with the money.
I mean, it seems incredible to me, Nathan, that we're in this situation where you have, and I don't know, there must be statistics now coming out on how many people are defaulting or have declared to their landlords that they can't pay rent.
Oh, it's over 40%.
This is like mind blowing, right?
Yeah, and it's going to increase. It's going to increase. We're looking at 65% by November.
What's that?
We're looking at 65% by November.
Yeah.
These
65% of people are not paying rent?
Yes, by November.
These are mind blowing. Yeah. And you say, well, gee, they can go out and rent something else. Well, if they're in the situation, they have no income or very little, they have no savings, and they have credit card debt, they can't move in to someplace else. Is this now a massive street community that we've already been fighting against for so many years. I mean,
They're going to move in to the guys who's got a spare room. You know what I mean? I have seen that in the building that I'm in. I'm in the big rental building, right? I'm paying rent. So I guess I shouldn't have 65%, but I'm paying rent like an idiot. Pay a lot of rent. Anyway, they're probably going to move in, like pay cash someone who has a room for rent in their house,
Well,
in the suburbs or something.
Another option, the room and house hacking is going to be a bigger thing. And house hacking is basically where you own or rent a whole house and then you rent out for each room. But also, and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember, but in places like Apple Valley and areas with a lot of land, there's several large investors right now that are buying up these spaces and basically setting up for people who are going to live in either converted vans, RVs. I mean, literally, there's places that are planning for hundreds and hundreds of new residents to live like that. And my personal experience with that is there's a lot of people who are leaning that way. I have 10 acres up in the northern part of LA County. And when I first bought it, you couldn't see anybody around you. I mean, it's all just open land. There's no utilities, there's nothing there. And I've been going up there every so often. Ken knows, he's laughing because he knows I love going to look at it. I don't know.
No, but I also like what Andrew Perry said. It's like the stacks from Ready Player One, and he's so right.
Yeah.
It was Cleveland, Ohio, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
But areas like that, you're absolutely right. The areas like that, they're filling in. I mean, I have, I'm looking out over hundreds of acres and I'm suddenly seeing literally dozens of trailers just pop up on land and they live off, a water tank and solar power or propane.
Again, but let's look at this as investors, guys. I know it's really bad for so many people, and I feel bad for the property owners, but what a land grab opportunity 2 years down the road, or maybe even a year down the road, because they probably will not be able to pay their mortgage, which means is you're going to see a lot of foreclosures and an opportunity to pick stuff up on the cheap. So
not just foreclosures, but there will definitely be more properties on the market.
Yep.
Because right now there's a lot of people who have equity, and a lot of these investors have more equity now than, let's just say, for example, in 2011 or 2010 when there was a foreclosure wave. There'll be more foreclosures, but it won't be like that. But there will be a lot more houses that have to sell because people have lost their money.
Yeah.
You're talking high density areas only, right? Like cities. Pretty much
for the most part. Yeah, the areas that people are moving out of right now. Or areas that, are the job markets don't rebound, right? I mean, unemployment is the #1 connector to predicting real estate, and unemployment is insanely high right now. So, that's a...
And that doesn't change until things open up again, period.
That's right, we won't even see the real results. Now, what we have found out about forbearance is the experts were projecting very high rates of forbearance, which would then mean large numbers of people who have balloon payments, which they can't pay. And it turns out very few people actually, like maybe 7%, they were projecting like 20%, but 7% did forbearance. So that part's going to be definitely lower. Now, it's interesting you talk about opportunities because there's going to be and there is currently a gigantic opportunity in commercial real estate. And John can tell us all about that, actually. He's an expert in this.
Hey guys, so my name is John. I'm the co-founder of Brickwork. My partner, Alex Irvine, is a land use consultant in downtown. So basically we provide information for either landowners, developers, or brokers alike that pretty much tells you what the development potential is on any property, mostly for multifamily, new development, mixed use, but redevelopment purposes as well. So we provide that currently in LA County, Orange County, the Valley, and we're starting to expand. So kind of touching on that, I think I wanted to kind of share my experience with talking with landowners. So specifically, multi-generational, multi-office owners of retail properties or commercial properties. They actually would have never pre-pandemic thought of selling their portfolio or even joint venturing with the developer. But I think post, they are, because they're getting hit exactly like you guys were talking about on both fronts. The small business tenants are not paying their leases, and on the loan end or the bank end, the local bank that they had a great relationship with post-pandemic are not necessarily working with them to do a forbearance or drop the rate or go interest only. They're actually getting laughed at, and that's exactly how it was described to me. I was shocked. They have their portfolio is in the hundreds of millions, right, with the local bank. So I think this is the first time that they're starting to realize what in our portfolio is not performing, and what's the highest and best use. And what they're starting to realize is that developers who we're speaking with all the time are obviously penciling projects post-pandemic. They're looking at, after entitling and getting topping out, that's potentially 3-4 years down the road. So the only changes that they are looking at based on what's going to happen post-pandemic are design changes. So are millennials, post-millennials going to be working remotely? And if they are, why don't we design that in the apartments that we build? So instead of where I'm at, where this was built back in 2002, maybe the apartments moving forward build an area for you to work at home, if that makes sense, like a built-in desk, better Wi-Fi service that connects to that apartment. Obviously retail and mixed use that's more tech forward. So anything as far as Amazon, stores where you could just check out, different use cases for the ground floor. So that's kind of what I'm starting to see as opportunity for developers and for property owners.
Do you think that the commercial real estate, the way that we saw it, will come back?
Yeah, so I think what I've been hearing.
And how long?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, Andrew? I saw you were asking about that.
So I think they do, but it's just a shift. So I'm getting a lot of developers that are asking our users, and also myself included, do you have any opportunities for redevelopment? So they're looking at hotels, 100 key and up sites to redevelop as mixed use apartments. The one developer that emailed recently was from Irvine Companies, right? They have.
What kind of areas would be redeveloping hotels as apartments, you think?
Yeah, so, this question, it's hard to be very generic because everything in Southern California is so neighborhood specific, right? So if you ask a developer what they're looking for, if they don't know you, they always say, well, sure, I need, 200 plus units for it to pencil. I want type 1 builds, which are all steel, or type 3 or type 5. So those are very generic, but what we've done by this dialogue with the developers is once you start sending them sites, then there's more reasons than not that they don't want to build that, and they now get down to very specific. So the answer to that is what they're looking for is all based on neighborhood. So some of them, so another example, a developer reached out to us and said, we're looking for properties, and we've convinced our Opportunity Zone Fund and our limited partners to only build in Koreatown, 50 units up, nothing below grade. So no subterranean parking because that cost is too high. They want above grade, and they want 50 units and above. That's very specific, right, of what they're looking for. And then they don't want anything else in the valley except North Hollywood. So if you go, oh, what about Van Nuys? What about Woodland Hills? No. So, these examples speak to the funds, the limited partner investors, and the developers all have very specific criteria as far as neighborhood is concerned.
Right, but as far as you said, you had people looking to convert condos, hotels, no, condos into hotels, yeah. So was that more in like urban areas?
Oh, no, no. So it was hotels to multifamily. It was very,
Right.
very, very generic with that. But to answer a little bit more in depth to that, commercial asset classes, what we're seeing is that there is a push to what's in demand post-pandemic. So one of our users, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So one of our users just closed a deal on Stalker Street, $35 million deal. He used our reports for the due diligence. It was a developer from Chicago. What did they want to use that space for? To build flex studio space. So I had no idea, but there is a shortage of studio space for all the streaming companies. So Netflix, Amazon, Disney. There is more projects being greenlit now, than ever before, because there's so many eyeballs watching this like crazy. But physically, where are they going to film all of that, if that makes sense? So the new play is flex, you know, you could call it studio space, but it's also flex industrial space, flex e-commerce for the next Amazons that want to do fulfillment centers, you know, that kind of stuff.
And how long do you think that trend is going to go? Do you think it's going to be a long-term after pandemic, or do you think, you know, maybe mid next year, end of next year, that's going to cycle out?
Good question. I think there is, you know, when post-pandemic, I think certain hotels will survive, but in aggregate, not all of them will. I think Airbnb will grow. I think so. There are going to be remnants of new patterns of behavior post-pandemic, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So
what do you think the biggest new pattern is going to be?
In which asset class? You mean multifamily or?
Let's say multifamily, yeah.
Yeah.
Because like where Ethan lives, right? He's downtown LA. That, from what I understand, is largely a ghost town right now, real estate wise. And so is that kind of thing, that area going to be more flex space? Or, I mean, what do you think the biggest trend is going to be that's going to stay? So if I'm an investor and I'm looking to plan for post-pandemic, what should I expect to see?
Well, here's the thing. In broad sense, I think there's still a housing crisis. I think ADU rules just got more relaxed. I think there's bills right now on the state assembly, right, that if you subdivide a R1 lot, right, what they're saying is you could do it by right. That's the bill, right? We'll see if it actually passes. But imagine that going through 12, 15 months of subdivision, right? And you just go directly to building and get permits and start building that thing in 3 to 6 months. That's amazing, right? So that would help with housing. I think overall in general, the developers are very bullish in housing in general. Now, they're just different categories of housing and different, you know, so one developer we spoke with, Equity Residential, has, and Trammell Crow. Those are two big, well-known developers here in LA. Both of them realize they have too much urban assets in their portfolio. And what they're looking for right now is suburban assets, right? So they're looking in Long Beach, they're looking in Santa Ana, they're looking in kind of that mid-ground where it's not necessarily Hollywood and downtown, but it's surrounding areas. So I think they're still bullish for sure on multifamily, if that makes sense. They're just now getting a little more specific on neighborhood and what's in their portfolio and what design changes they want to do to accommodate post-pandemic renters.
Hey, John, quick question regarding the co-working spaces. Yeah. I read that SoftBank actually says in 2021, they will show a profit for WeWorks, which blows my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if they somehow see that people are going to go back to the office, would that hinder your side of that work at home loft environment?
Yeah, great question. So we actually have a few co-living, co-working, and there's developers pre-pandemic that were trying to look for a combination of both. So there was one developer that was in City West, which is just right adjacent to downtown, that was trying to brand a WeWork, WeLive under their name in one complex. You're a member, you co-live, and then you also co-work, right? So we've spoken to a few recently, and they surprisingly are still bullish on co-work and co-live. They just feel that it's more going to be flex space as long as they're careful with not packing too many people together. Maybe they're more mindful of spacing them, which would be less ROI for that business ultimately, but it is what it is. I think the demand for some sort of flex office is going to keep.
I think Andrew Perry's got a great example. Andrew, why don't you explain why you think there's an opportunity there?
So I'm renting a space at a co-working space. It's called Novell. It's right next door to the WeWork building here in San Diego. What I see is a lot of larger companies are moving in here, and I asked about this. I asked my office manager, and apparently the larger companies that are downsizing, that are letting go of their big, expensive offices, are moving into what used to be co-working spaces. So I'm seeing a lot of new faces around here.
Yeah, that makes sense because they're downsizing. Just remember, by the way, Google just says they're not expecting people to come back in the office until January of 2022.
Right. And that's if they just decide to ever have them come back.
But
Right?
it just, maybe there is a WeWork opportunity. So, hey, last thing real quick. You said you looked at mostly Southern California.
Yes.
How is Orange County versus LA and vice versa? What are you looking at? Are you looking at more people staying more domicile in those areas as opposed to going to offices?
Yeah, so actually, so some of the developers that we also have users for are now shifting gears. You know, the hotspot areas for development have always been Hollywood and obviously downtown. Now they're shifting gears more toward Orange County because they feel that, I forgot what the term is, but it's not fully suburban and it's not fully urban. So it's kind of that middle ground that they're looking for. That's not too far away from things that are happening in LA proper, but it's not, or it's right in the middle ground. So that's what they're wanting, because they want the flex option for employees to either go into work and not have a big commute and also be able to work remotely. But right now in Orange County, everyone's, from what I hear, is still mostly working remotely.
And do you have a lot of vacancies or open, or are you just, because right here in LA, and you put your house up for a market that's over $1.5 million, it goes away like that. It's bought. Are you finding the same thing happen by you?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a big exodus from downtown where Ethan's at that have a family and kids. They're definitely in demand coming down here. That's what I'm hearing.
Got it. Perfect. Thanks so much, John. Appreciate it. Please stay on and you know, participate for the rest of the show. Real quick, Bernardo, did you get a twin? What's happening over there? Is that a background, Bernardo, of yourself?
Yes, that's my virtual Bernardo.
That looks too damn weird, Bernardo.
That is really weird. And with there's a lot I'm going to say, but I'm not.
Yeah, that literally, Bernardo, that's like Googling Google. It would just break everything. Having two of you like that, get rid of it.
Nag.
That is wild. I saw a question that I missed earlier, Andrew. What was the question you were asking about the threats to agents?
Oh, well, when you mentioned that a lot of agents were worried about their safety and were carrying weapons, I was just curious what they were worried about.
Well, I think, and Valentina, please, you probably have a different perspective than I do, but I think overall, it's being cornered and attacked in a house, being robbed. I mean, think about it. Agents, they're out. They're in hundreds of different places, sometimes a day, or at least a month, definitely. They're by themselves very often. Nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows who you're with. There's a lot of potential there for something negative to happen. Valentina, do you experience that?
By the way, gun sales are up 250% in Los Angeles. 250%. You can't get inventory. People feel like they need to be protected, and
half of those are agents. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It's probably true. I mean, really, seriously, I could see anyone that's going in an environment to where they have accessibility to all that, and they're alone in most cases. Yeah.
And actually, just so you guys know, there's most of the time, it's very hard to get a concealed carry permit. But from what I've been told by many agents is being a real estate agent makes it easier because you're in considered dangerous situations consistently.
Scary.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing. I mean, especially Valentina, do you experience that?
Not really. Here in Las Vegas, it's a little bit different. I do have to say, we do have a lot of buyers consultations even going on now, even though we're trying to social distancing and everything else. And that's where Zoom meetings and having these consultations being held online. That's very important to us. And I think it all depends on what's your process and how you run your business. For myself, I will not meet a client blindsided because I am a woman and I just won't do it. So I like to kind of, in a way, screen them, so to speak, to make sure that they're serious buyers and so on and so forth. And I only like to meet with one buyer or if not their spouse. But other than that, I will not meet a large party.
All right, well,
makes sense.
that's a good way to mitigate
You're in a
the
killer
risk.
area. I mean, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to use that term. That's a horrible term as we talk about this. You're in a really vibrant area right now. Vegas is exploding, isn't it?
It really is. And just hearing what California is going through, you know, Las Vegas is in pretty good shape. And what you guys are going through, even with the tenants, because here in the state of Nevada, the governor just released a $30 million rental assistance program, and they're taking applications. Yes, we have 140,000 families, but about 85% of them are being approved to assist their landlords. So we are in pretty good shape compared to California, and we are booming, that's for sure.
That's awesome.
How is the market over there overall for sales and you know, give us an idea of what's happening in Vegas.
The market is great here in Las Vegas. We peaked in 2006, and unfortunately in 2008, we were at the bottom of the crop, so to speak. And now being in 2020, even during COVID, we have a 42% increase in supply and demand. So right now, typically last year, we had about 6,800 listings on the market. Currently today, we only have 1,285 resale listings. So our medium sell price, an average overall Las Vegas, we're looking at 378,000, which in 2006, quote unquote, was a peak for Las Vegas. It was at 320. So we're in really good condition here to invest.
Yeah. I know during the burst, the 2008 implosion, Henderson was probably hit one of the hardest. How is Henderson now?
Henderson is doing amazing, but then again, we have Allegiant Stadium that just opened up. Even though we don't have any spectators, the Raiders are not quite playing there yet, but because of the distance with Henderson, their property value has increased tremendously. So just to give you an idea, from January up to today, now that we're in September, most of the property values out there has averaged a 12.7% increase.
That's great. Adam, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I know that the housing market in Vegas is really hot. What about the hotel, casino, condo market? I'm just wondering whether that got hit worse because the casinos themselves are closed down.
It did. And they're the ones that got hit the worst out of this whole pandemic. Casinos are not closed down. We are back up and running. Unfortunately, they're only running at a 50% occupancy. So the tourism here in Las Vegas is still pretty low. We're still trying to rebound just like every other state throughout the nation. Now, when it comes to resales for lofts and et cetera, even the high rises, we have seen a decrease in value and in inventory. So even though there's a decrease in value, there also has been a decrease in inventory, which kind of stabilizes them, but they have not had any type of appreciation in the last past 6 months.
So is that a buying opportunity? Do you think there's going to be a correction for that?
You know, it's really hard to say, Nathaniel. None of us have a crystal ball. Don't we wish we did?
Right.
At this moment in time, the only thing I can say is that even when you incorporate all aspects of the housing industry, when it comes to lofts, when it comes to high rises, condos on the strip, we're pretty stable. We're not seeing a huge deficit like some of the major cities.
Got it. Andrew,
Are buffets still open?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are buffets still open?
Only a few of them were able to reopen. It's not self-served anymore, though.
All right. Akira, you had a question.
Hey guys, I'm just joining now, so sorry to just barge in with a more personalized question, but I'm in San Diego, Carlsbad area, And one of our clients, we were going to just rent an office space for a day to do a whole day of video shooting, right? And because we're all entrepreneurs, one thing led to another. And now we're looking at renting a commercial office space to set up a permanent video studio and live event streaming studio. And they're looking at options right now that most of them are asking for a 3-year lease. So my question for you, I have so many questions related to this project, but my question would be, good idea, bad idea? What should we look at negotiating for this space that would be part office?
That's a John question. John, dive into this.
Yeah, help me out.
John, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah. Can you recap the question? Sorry, I was just regarding it's in Carlsbad and
North County, San Diego, probably about 3,000 square foot spaces is what we're looking at right now. And the client has, they're willing to invest in a 3-year lease if that makes sense. And we would be using it for live event production. We'd set up a live streaming studio. They'd use it for office space. I guess the question would be, should they jump into a lease? Because that's their money. I've got a budget for building the production studio and having that as a business. Anything that we should be looking at right now?
You're asking really right away, Akira, if the prices are going to go down dramatically also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I know of current commercial owners, the ones I'm talking to about redevelopment, the ones that have issues with their tenants, and those can be a variety of small businesses right now. But from what I'm hearing is no one is really committing and signing any long-term leases, and the landlords are obviously being flexible for now. They're kind of bridging them on more of short-term to figure out, okay, well, is this going to stick as far as the small business owner is concerned? Are we going to get revenues up? And when is that going to be? So in your question about recommending that, I mean, if they're willing to, by all means, but what we're hearing is that a lot of small businesses are looking for flexibility, and the landlords are willing to give it to them because the only other option or choice is not leasing that space or them not performing. So if it's going to push them away, I wouldn't probably offer that. But if you're willing to be flexible and work with them, then I think that would be a better route.
When you say flexible and work with them, are you saying do not commit to a 3-year lease? Are you saying commit to a year? When you say flexible and reasonable, what's your thought?
Short-term leases. So it seems, so even the example of WeWork, the competitors of WeWork, Nautel and some of the others that got funded post WeWork, what they were doing was, instead of that WeWork model where they were getting all these small businesses, and those small businesses were signing short-term, memberships, right, to occupy that space. Nautel and some of the other bigger co-working companies were working with the developers, and they were sharing in cost and in profit. So it was more of a joint venture with the owners versus them leasing out that 200,000 square foot space and then subdividing that in memberships and trying to earn as much membership revenue. So to go back to your question, I would say, if they're open to a 3-year lease, yes. But what a lot of what we're hearing is right now, the landlords are more than willing to give more of a shared responsibility as far as, okay, we're not having to have you commit to a 3-year lease. Let's work this out in 3-6 month increments until we get past where you guys are doing well revenue wise, and then we can lock you in on a longer term lease. That's what we're hearing.
Yeah, and what's a really good price per square footage for commercial space right now in this area?
Well, that's a good question. I would look into CoStar or anything else because they're so neighborhood specific right now, and those numbers have been obviously fluctuating down, and depending on what the business is, what their vertical is, if they're small, if they're flex, they're getting more actually retaining per square foot, because now you're opening yourself up to a multitude of tenants, right? Because it's flex space in general, whether it's industrial or anything else, versus it being so specific where a restaurant is the only tenant that could be on there. And those numbers we've seen have been going down.
Thank you.
Great questions. Valentina, I got a question for you pertaining to Vegas itself. First, what are the hot areas, the hot regions in Vegas? So if you had to have a home, a single family home, where would it be? And if you're in a condo, what area would it be?
Condo wise, you really want to stick to the southwest side of Las Vegas, just because of the fact that for some reason or another, there's where all the Californians come in, and that's where a hot spot is for rentals.
Is that near Red Rock area?
No, southwest is more towards South Point, M Casino. It's right off the I-15 South. Okay. So it's one of the first areas that you hit coming into the main city of Las Vegas from California. Now, if you had to have a house built, I would definitely recommend, believe it or not, the northwest Las Vegas, more towards Mount Charleston, Centennial area, Sky Canyon area. The reason is because it's not fully developed out there yet.
And I know you're looking at long-term to get a home built out there. Is there a, because here it takes forever to get something built in most respects, right? Is there a long waiting list for a new home construction out there, or is it fairly quick?
There isn't. It is fairly quick, and we're looking at a 4 to 6 month time frame. And we have quite a bit of standing inventory that new home builders just have up for sale. That's already been, they're spec homes. So due to the fact of the shortage that we have in Las Vegas for resale.
And one last question for me. Someone mentioned that the electricity is very expensive out there. Is that true? Because I'm hearing contradictions on that.
It's not. I mean, again, if you compare the cost of living of Nevada to California, we live off chump change compared to you guys. So
did you say Trump change or chump change?
No, chump change.
Sure. Okay,
so, I mean, no, it's not. A 2,500 square foot home here in Las Vegas, your electricity is probably about $250 a month. It's not that bad. And that's an average.
Got it.
By the way, Ken, Valentina is who helped May in Vegas.
Oh, you helped my potential, well, my future, not potential for sure, my future mother-in-law.
I did, and I absolutely loved her.
She's a hoot, isn't she? We're actually seeing her this weekend. We're coming out.
Well, tell her I said hello.
Yeah, she rocks. That's great news. All right. So, and by the way, Nathaniel, are you seeing more people saying Vegas is the spot they're going, Nathaniel, or the ones that are leaving California? Or are they going up to Washington, Idaho, or Wyoming, Austin? Where are you seeing the exodus, Nathaniel?
You know, it's pretty interesting because even though Vegas isn't listed as significantly lower price of living, there are a lot of people who are looking at moving there, and because it is close to LA, so it's easy to get back.
Yeah.
Right. So they can visit, they can be residents of Vegas, but come back. I think Michael Turpin did that for years before he moved down to Puerto Rico. And so I do see a lot of people going there because it is seen as a fun place. Now, historically, it's been a lot more volatile than LA, but right now it seems like it's really getting, very, very strong. I think, Andrew, did you have a question about how it was now versus previously? Oh, I don't know. I thought maybe I read that. Oh, like 2006. Is it better than 2006? Just as
yes,
good?
It is. No, we're better than 2006. Through the housing of Nevada, we are at our peak 2020, believe it or not, and through the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And do you project it to keep going up, stabilize, soften?
We thought for sure that the market was going to soften, if not stabilize, and we weren't going to see such a huge increase in appreciation of property, of the value of properties. But it proved us wrong. COVID-19, like I mentioned earlier, Henderson has seen an average of 12.8%. And here in Las Vegas, our inventory, from just comparing it to last year, we're at a 43.6% deficit. So COVID has treated us pretty well.
And are you seeing, similar to here, a lot increase in the flex space, or do you deal with the commercial side at all?
I don't deal with the commercial side at all and have no interest in it.
No problem. That's good. Adam, do you have questions about Vegas?
Yeah, two. One of them is what are considered from a house point of view the safest parts of Vegas, and what's the general view of the Summerlin area?
So I can't really say what is the safest part, obviously, but I can say Henderson statistically it has a lower crime rate than any part of Las Vegas that's close to Las Vegas. Summerlin is a very prominent area and it's desirable. People move to Summerlin frequently.
How about solar? Are we seeing lots of use of solar out there?
We are.
Yeah, that's it. As an energy source, yeah, solar.
We are.
Yeah, that makes more sense too. Yeah, guys, I'll tell you, and I mentioned this the other day at Metal. Every time we see massive change in forms of transportation, the wheel, the ships, horse and buggy, planes, trains, you name it, that's when humans went and journeyed somewhere else and lived in other places. Remember, Rome was the center of the world at one point in time. Rome, Constantinople, Paris, it moved around. But as transportation became more frequent and more accessible, people left those areas. I'm trying to tell you, transportation, Zoom is teleportation. It's another form of transportation. And
yeah, I think
where else works.
Ken, I think that's actually a very astute point that I want to dig into a little bit more next week. But if you look at the way really the world has grown and cities grown and where people live, everything is based around cars, trains. These are the things that changed and determined where cities were, how they grew, why they grew the way they did, who moved there, right? I mean, the reason so many studios are in the Valley versus the West Side is there's no marine layer in the morning and they could shoot all day, right? Chatsworth was the horse capital of the world because that was the first place they could rest their horses. Vegas is there because that's the first place you could access water along that trail, along that road, right? Originally, I mean, it's all based in transportation and resources. Now that is going to dynamically change really worldwide. And I don't think we're going to see that change really for several years because it's going to change how the cities are growing and where they grow. If you look at, for example, you know, Lancaster, you could have $1 million gets you a 10,000 square foot house in a gated community with an indoor outdoor Caesar's Palace style pool, right? Or if you look at Augusta, Georgia, you could have a gorgeous southern mansion on 3 acres for $700,000, right? The negatives of those places are starting to go away because you don't, the biggest negative is you're not close to wherever you need to work or go to school. And now work you can do from home and a lot of school you can do from home. So I think it's literally going to change the fabric of how cities are growing and where the most important things are. Maybe people will realize they don't want to live right on a freeway just because it's convenient to get around, or sit in the middle of traffic just because they don't have to go as far.
What's going to happen to all these high rises out here? I mean, are there any theories about, I mean, they're empty. I can look at them from my place and they're kind of dark. It's really weird. It's eerie. It is a ghost town in some blocks of the city. Is there any thoughts or theories about what they're going to do to bring these back to life, or are they just going to sit here dormant?
Well, I know that there is a long-term plan to increase even more travel and short-term rentals, which have historically always been a more valuable asset, like a more valuable rental return, right? So I know there's a back end of a huge tourism push, but that's not going to happen for at least a year and a half, right? So short term,
cities can still be tourism capital, like as far as museums and things like that. We'll come back to
museums. It's still, Hollywood's still here. People are still going to want to visit. They just might not want to live there, right? Olympics, for example, Augusta, Georgia, right? Yeah. That city triples in population for the week of the Masters, right?
Edwin had a good point. Edwin, it's not a joke, man. I think that's exactly what's going to happen because there's so much homeless. There's so much. It's like multiplied. There's tents.
It was weird.
Everywhere.
It was weird the other day biking because I bike down the boardwalk in Santa Monica all the time. And one weekend I'm biking down and there's no homeless. It's like, wait a second, this is weird. Then I found out they put them all up in hotels in condos. They took
Yeah.
them off. Problem is, it's super expensive to do this. I mean, this is great too for the property owners, but now they're finding after a month of them staying there, they're damaged. There's so much destruction to the rooms because they don't respect the property as much as someone that's not homeless would. So
We
there's
have
a
entire
lot.
blocks sectioned off here where they're like tent cities now. Like
Oh, yeah.
you got to come down by City Hall. It's crazy.
It's
And what are they going to do?
Nathan, I
think it's a
I
buying
have to tell
opportunity.
I have to
those are
tell
your
you
feet
that
now?
even with
Bernardo, are those your feet now?
yeah. I have to tell you that I did one unit, well, I did 2 units actually for corporate rentals on my new construction, and they've been completely like they're booked out completely. It's like people are renting, they're renting them booked out consistently through Airbnb and corporate rental market. So, I mean, that's definitely happening. You know, I'm seeing that. I've still got 2 units for rent out of the 6, and the other 3 are rented out. But I'm not getting as much traffic. And I have several friends. You know, I've got some other properties, and I've noticed like last year in some of my 1 bedrooms that I have for rent, you know, in LA, I would get, you know, maybe 10, 15 inquiries a week for single bedroom units that were less on the lower side, not as expensive to rent. And right now I'm lucky if I'm getting 1 request a week, and not even that. So, you know, LA, the rentals in LA aren't doing as well, at least that's what I'm finding, as they were doing previously. The Airbnb is definitely up. And even my larger rental units, I'm getting some traffic, but you know, it's slowed down.
So
Nathaniel, is that an opportunity? I'm sorry, is that an opportunity? Because I know the city has allocated millions and millions of dollars to solve the homeless problem, right? So is getting one of the buildings and maybe trying to partner with them and house some of these individuals, because they have to do something because people are moving out, right, Ken? So if people are leaving, they're going to have to make changes to keep these high net worth individuals here. So there might be an opportunity there.
I think there is. I think there's some huge opportunity, and I think everybody's always trying to wait till you're at the bottom, but people who buy at the bottom don't know it's the bottom till after, right? So that's I mean, that's true everywhere, right, Valentina? True.
I agree.
Yeah. So I think there's a huge opportunity to take advantage of these huge spaces, which if you see, people did that in the 80s, and you know, they turned properties they bought for hundreds of thousands into properties that, at least until a few months ago, were worth tens of millions of dollars, right? And it was through being more creative with the purposes. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that these large vacancies and the changes of how people want to live and where they want to live are bringing. And for people who can take advantage of them, it will pay you off in spades. I mean, tens of millions of dollars to be had there.
Well, there you go. Nathaniel, what a great show today.
Thanks, Ken.
Well, let's thank everybody that's been hanging out with us.
Yeah, Valentina, John, Andy, everybody, Ethan.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Bernardo,
you, guys.
just
Appreciate it.
background.
Good
All
one,
right.
guy. Good one. Good one.
Thanks,
Everyone.
Nathan. Love the beard.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it. If you have other questions you want addressed later, just message me and we'll get to everything.